Welcome to Business Women Australia podcast, the podcast for ambitious women who are serious about business success and leadership development, keen to increase their knowledge and skills.
And welcome to another episode of Business Women Australia podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross. Now, my guest today says, what employer doesn't want to see their employees be more productive, or what employer doesn't want to see their employees be more productive, more present, and ultimately more loyal? And joining me on today's show is Kathryn Dixon. Now, Kathryn is a relationship manager within the IOOF Employee Solutions team at IOOF. And she works with employers to provide employee benefits such as insurance and superannuation and financial wellbeing education, as well as tools. Now, it's Kathryn's mission to work with employees from a wide range of sectors who seek the benefits of supporting their employees to develop their financial knowledge, their skills and wellbeing. And she says it's a win-win for both. Now, on today's show, Kathryn's going to share what the current employment benefits environment looks like. She's also going to share more insights around the current challenges that are facing employers as they seek to engage with their employees to enhance their wellbeing programs, as well as the essential elements of an effective wellbeing program. So welcome to the show, Kathryn.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
There's a lot that has been happening, a lot of different challenges with employees, companies around the world. And as they know, it's so very important that no matter the challenges, that the leadership of the company continues to always have at the forefront employees' wellbeing program. Let's just get all on the same page. How would you define an employee program? What does that mean to you and IOOF?
Yeah. Well, look, I think to a lot of people, historically, an employee benefits program has been really quite straightforward. It's been things like perhaps a corporate superannuation plan. There might be employer-funded life and TPD insurance, and perhaps income protection insurance, particularly more so where there's a global affiliation. Sometimes there'll be health insurance. All of us are familiar with the likes of fruit baskets and maybe particularly in corporates, the massage every month or so coming in. Sometimes there's discounts on insurance. So some of the bigger, or discounts on any product really, some of the bigger companies in particular have a broader program of employee benefits. And so they may have cashback offers and all sorts of different discounts that they may negotiate either individually with a provider, or they may have bought into an entire package. Yeah. So that has historically been what employee benefits has looked like. In terms of what do we think it looks like now, or where's it going, probably Australia's a wee bit behind the eight ball in some regards, in thinking for employers to think that they've got a place to pay or a part to play in ensuring or assisting their employees to develop financial wellness and resilience and knowledge. Financial wellbeing or financial components of wellbeing programs are pretty well established offshore. But yeah, we're just starting that journey here, and I guess here at IOOF we're really keen to be a front foot on that, and really play a large part in developing financial wellbeing for Australians as a whole. And this is, what I do in the wellbeing space is just one aspect of that.
Yeah. One of the things that you said to me, Kathryn, before we went live, and I'd love you to share a little bit more around this, is, often we look at, or the corporations look at employee benefits as a nice to have, would like to have. But you say actually now it is so very important. So I would love you to share some insights around the importance of that, and maybe look at some of the benefits, because obviously organizations are going to be looking at through that lens as well. So share a little bit of why is this becoming a must-have?
So, well, we've all lived through the last 16, 18 months or so, and so the world's changed, and we sort of all accept that. But what we've seen is that employers have, struggled to deliver some of those benefits, fruit for example, the massage. You can't do that in an environment where the workforce has been working at home for much of the year. What they've also seen is the increase in stress. So financial stress there's three key figures I'd throw out right now as to why thinking about this sort of work is really important. There's lots of studies all around the world, but the general figure sits around 50 to 55% of employees feel financially stressed at any given point in time. So that's one figure to think about. 90, every employee that is financially stressed is costing the employer around about $1,900 plus a year. So that's quite conservative. So if you're actually looking at, if we put it in really basic figures, a workforce of 400 people, and say 50% of them is financially stressed, then you're looking at a cost of about $380,000 per year.
Wow. Wow.
So those sorts of things are what we're seeing now. We've come through the pandemic. Well, we haven't come through. If you're here in Melbourne, you're back in it. But what we've seen is an example where people are financially stressed, and as they've gone through, the pandemic's only made it worse. At times we get better news. We're now seeing some of the government stimulus packages dropping off or increasingly dropping off. So we're only going to see this sort of thing increase. What we're seeing in some of the surveys is people saying that 4 in 10 Australians are claiming stress as the main driver of their mental health and financial stress. So, the figures are quite staggering, but there's something that people can do, and that comes back to the employer.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying there, the fact that some of these figures are going to be exacerbated because of what's going on. And as we know, I mean, there's that saying, isn't it? People become almost classically conditioned the minute something happens in the news, and instantly we go back to that kind of feeling of dread. And you find that this continues to, if we're not careful, to become far more impactful. And if we're not addressing it, if we're not, supporting the team, we'll find that becomes something that inhibits their productivity, their well-being, their emotional well-being.
Absolutely. So that productivity, is that $1,900 figure I threw out there, is made up of a mix of absenteeism, presenteeism. So they're at work, but they're distracted by financial matters. Now that might be, how are they going to pay their mortgage? Or, there's an insurance bill, or like in my case yesterday, the washing machine broke down. So those things come out of the blue. How do you deal with them? The other side of that is just thinking about the employer as a whole. Now in Australia, we're seeing unemployment has, it hasn't gone way up like we were expecting. And we've got some sectors that I'm working with at the moment that are really struggling in order to recruit and retain staff. So again, this becomes something that is another employee benefit. So that the need to build out their employee benefits program becomes ever more important.
Yes.
And you have that win-win. One of the other figures that was really interesting, it does come out of the US, is that of employees who participate in a financial wellbeing program, 81% of them, so most, plan to stay with that employer for 5 years or more. Now compare that with the 48% who aren't in a financial wellbeing program, and they're saying, well, we don't see ourselves staying with that employer. So there's some really clear benefits that are there. And yeah, it's just a really interesting place to see. It also gives you the opportunity to build yourself as an employer of choice.
Yes. And, as you were sharing some of the statistics and some of the reasons that employees are now starting to feel more stressed in certain areas, it really confirms the importance of a business when they're thinking of their employee benefits to also look at, because there's a diversity of reasons of stress and what the employee may be experiencing, are our current employee benefits programs, are they as diverse, or the offerings within that's going to support different team or different employees at different stages, whatever it may be?
And that's a huge challenge for any employer. What we do tend to find is that, and to go back to that comment I made about globally being more ahead. Where we've got corporates that have a global connection, we find that they are the ones that have got their employee benefits that they're trying to match up with what they've got overseas. And so they're trying to find that sort of thing here. But there's only so many dollars in a budget that's available, and sometimes it's a case of redirecting budgets to where you're getting the most, to be really colloquial, bang for your buck. But what we are seeing is that, and the research is showing us very clearly that what employees are wanting, and this is out of some various studies, is access to some tools, some financial wellness tools. Now, that could be as basic as how do I budget? Or worried about their retirement savings, or they're looking for how do we invest. And we've had lots of calls from people who have watched the markets go up and down, and they're going, oh, do I need to pull all my money out of super? Well, where they can access it, or could access it, and they're just putting it in cash, and so they lost the big bounces. So there was a lot of naivety that you see, and it's only when you're working within this area that you recognise that perhaps we could say our education system has let us down. In the past, financial literacy is not something that it comes naturally. It's certainly not taught in schools as yet. And I think this is where we're now seeing some of that playing out. One of the things that I should have said too is that in terms of when I was talking about those financially stressed employees, women make up are far worse are even worse affected. Now, some of that can be the very nature of their work. It might be that they are hospitality or cafe, so they had issues in the past year. It might be that they're part-time. All of those sorts of factors can come into play. But what we did see was younger women disproportionately represented in the early release of super opportunities that were there last year. Now, that doesn't affect a 25-year-old right now, but taking that 10 or 20,000, if they went back for that second tranche, will make a long-term difference. So all of those sorts of decisions, people need to actually have the confidence and knowledge to build their resilience and their financial well-being.
Yeah. And sometimes, especially if we look at women, and I know that we've had a number of women that have been, highly efficient and skilled and knowledgeable in the area of finance. And they have confirmed that in one of the areas that many women, young, right, even through not so young, it's the financial knowledge, and the well-being that lets them, that is an area of growth. And one of the reasons is, well, we don't know what we don't know. And yet I can imagine that these educational programs that can support women no matter what age certainly is going to help them in their overall well-being, because they feel far more informed and don't feel that, because sometimes we don't want to ask a question because we don't want to look like we don't know. But in actual fact, there is no such thing as a silly question, only the one not asked, because we're not then informing ourselves. And so is there any studies, and if not, that's fine. This might be a really good for an organization to do some studies on this. When women have gotten more financial knowledge, that impacts, I would imagine, their overall well-being, because they feel more informed, or they're able to have better decisions when it comes to their finances.
Yeah, there are examples of that out there, and it is a case of there is a correlation between financial literacy and wellness, but there are lots of other factors involved in there as well, and it just doesn't necessarily mean, for example, you're going to have a bigger super balance or anything. One of the other things, or the other things that employees have said that they really value, so certainly their access to financial tools, and I'll come back to that, or financial knowledge and tools, but they also, in terms of the well-being, the whole employee benefits package, say we don't know enough. It's not communicated well enough to us. Now that's happened both in the US and here, and so employers are now faced with, well, how do we actually make sure that we tell people the benefits they've got? One of the biggest things that I would say, and my experience has been that employers who provide, say, group insurance, so whether it's life and TPD or whether it's income protection, often an employee just takes that for granted, because it's not trumpeted enough or whatever. So it's not really building loyalty. It's certainly not building knowledge. It's just something they've got. And if they leave the employer, they may have a problem if they, have an existing condition and try and get insurance elsewhere. But that's something that's important to them. The other thing, two things that came out, and probably no surprise after the last year, is flexible working arrangements. I think we've all decided that, hey, flexible is the way to go, or hybrid, or whatever we like to call it, and how it ends up, and access to EAP programs. Now, again, that comes back to that whole stress bit. So I commented earlier on, 4 in 10 are financially stressed, or 50% financially stressed. That's the sort of thing that we're seeing in the correlation.
Yeah. Is some of the feedback, and I'm not sure if this has been tracked, but if an organisation, and we know that communication, you've just mentioned, a lot of times there is not that communication, so employees don't even know what's available for them in their benefits programs. But have organisations ever gone to employees and just did a check-in and actually asked them, what is it that you would like to see? Because I'm sure that, it's like with anyone, if someone gets a seat around the table, or at least have an opportunity to share their ideas, that can go a long way to really embrace that. Even if the decision, that might be right down the track, but at the moment, is that something that you see some employers doing with their employees?
Probably we're seeing elements of that from time to time. Yeah, it's not probably a big part of where I focus, but I think what is interesting is that desire that people are saying we don't understand the breadth of the benefits that are available to us and how they work. But what we've seen during the pandemic is, more and more employers concerned about their employees' well-being in its broadest context. And of course, I've just said, how much financial stress impacts and plays into that. But they do have a disconnect. So the employees are saying, we're really stressed. But the employers, this is a US study, 3 out of 4 of them think that their employees are better off than they are. So they've got to continue working through that. At the same time, an increasing number of them have said, yeah, look, I think we've got some sort of responsibility. Now, whether it's a responsibility, but they're thinking of it as a moral and ethical responsibility, or they're actually recognising that down the track, if they have healthy, productive employees, they'll be better off as well. So that's been an interesting one to see.
It is an interesting one to see, because if people that disconnect and the figures that you've shared before, if an organisation is, oh right, well obviously there's something that we need to be doing. Can we do something better to be able to communicate that? Because the figures confirm, when you do that across the workplace or the workforce, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And it's quite staggering. That $1,900 per person. As I said, really conservative figure, and the bigger your workforce, the bigger that issue becomes.
Yes.
But if we go back to what employers are doing, increasingly looking at what else can we do, because as I said, there's the retention and recruitment effort. The fruit basket is sort of, you eat the banana and it's gone. The gratification is gone. Whereas if you can make an impactful difference in someone's life that enables them to make good financial decisions, or the financial decisions that are right for them, and have some control over their financial security and future, you're making a long-term tangible difference in someone's life. And that comes back to, that's what employees are valuing.
Yeah, I know that you've touched on a number of these things too, but let's just summarize this, because some people may be just coming in and listening to the live, but I think it's great just so that they at least have, and this is the essential elements of an effective well-being program. What are some of those essential elements? Because if they're missing, then you need to get these in place.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that wherever you're going in terms of the provider you're going to choose to provide your financial wellbeing program, it's important they get to know the business. Now, that may not come right at the outset, but it's a really important understanding of the business, the drivers for the business. Is it, there's a 20% turnover per year? Do we need to work out a way to address that? Because there are other elements that you can add into a financial wellbeing program that can help address that. But at its core, a financial wellbeing program to me is three things. It's an education component. It's providing people with tools, and I'll come back to that. And the third one is providing or making access to general advice or general financial advice or personal financial advice if that's where they want to go to, easily available. Because what we've got at the moment is, it's almost like a triangle. People, we know that financial stress is a problem, but there are three issues that cause people to just go, I don't know what to do. And that is, trusting the source of the information they're getting it from. There's a whole lot of information on YouTube, bloggers, Instagram, newspapers, what's true, what's wrong, and it's technical stuff. So to go back to the comment you made, Anne-Marie, you don't know what you don't know, so you don't know which of those is right or not. The next one is, you want a personalised experience, so you want it to feel like it's a bit like Netflix and Amazon. Ultimately it's tailored for you. And the third one thing is, a lot of people are a little bit scared of financial advice, despite being told the difference it can make. And a financial wellbeing program enables them to tip their toe in the water, as it were, and take away some of the fear factor. They get some of that basic information. So if we go back to those four concepts, education, things like basic fundamentals of financial literacy, so cash flow, budget, debt. And you'd be surprised at when we talk about that with people, it's almost like a light bulb moment in some regards for some people. It's talking about investment, the understanding the difference between risk and return, time in the market. As I said, hauling something out when the market's at its bottom is not an ideal time to save, money. Talking about superannuation. I mean, superannuation keeps changing all the time. And we've got changing legislation at the moment that is actually going to make the employee benefits package, particularly where there's a corporate super plan involved, a little bit more challenging. And then, of course, we talk about protection. We forget that our basic, or a lot of people forget that their biggest asset is actually their ability to earn an income. So insurance becomes a really important part of having those four. Now, you can build out from there, but if you talk about it as a core, those are probably the core things. And then in terms of tools, again, I reflect back to that comment that there's lots of information out there, but what's right? So when we build a program, we're talking about, well, here are some really good, authoritative, authentic, to coin an overused word, sites that will provide you with useful information. We also offer an online tool that the individual can actually go on 24/7. They get access to it all for a year, and they can put their financial information in there and build a report that shows them where they're going. Now, it's general advice. It's a really useful tool for them to do for themselves, with their family, and it might throw up some traffic lights for them that say, oh dear, got to look at this. And it gives them the opportunity to start going, yes, I need to focus on, it might be my cash flow, it might be something else, or seek help. And then the third one is just finding easy access for general advice services. And it might be on a single scaled advice, or it might be the need that they need more holistic personal advice. So those are things that I think are really important. But therefore, the user, if you like, the employee, the thing that's really important and useful for the employer is to make sure that there's some analytics behind it. So a bit of a pulse check at the start of the process. What's the financial confidence in this organisation like? What's the financial stress like? And going back with things like, well, we've talked to them about these services and what's the uptake been? And then doing a pulse check at the end as well. Because an employer is going to want to invest in a program and add it to their employee benefits if they can see a reward for them as well, over and above the benefits they're providing to their staff.
Yeah. And, you and I having a conversation today, and with the technology available, there's nothing to stop employers by actually reaching out to some of the employees who have really looked at, well, what's part of this benefits program? What can I really leverage? And what's the impact been? So you could actually create case studies, if you will, from employees who are using that, and the impact that that's had in their life. Because how often do we hear something we think, oh, I didn't even know that was available. That's really
Yeah.
handy. I need to investigate a little bit more. So it almost becomes you said education so important, but what are we putting into place as an employer to be able to educate on this incredible program that we have here, so that people can really engage
Yeah,
with
and I think to just go back to that comment about superannuation, in the past, a lot of corporates or a lot of employers have had default superannuation plans. So a new employee starts, and unless they exercise choice,
it.
um, they'll end up in the employer's default program. Now, come 1st of July, assuming everything passes through the Senate, that's going to change. So a new employee comes along, and they will simply be stapled to whatever fund they've had in the past, unless they exercise to opt in. Now, an employer in the past has relied on the advice services and the information and the education services offered through those various super funds, if the business has been large enough. That's going to be diluted over time. So that's again where, if you're wanting to retain staff, recruit staff, develop a well-rounded and full employee benefits program, where you can actually see some tangible results, that's where this sort of thing becomes something that you possibly may want to look at.
Yeah. Kathryn, I know that we've only just scratched the surface.
We
And
have.
there's so many different components depending on obviously the company, the employees, and so forth. However, again, I think you've just walked your talk in that you're providing
Yeah.
information, general information to kind of, if people are listening and thinking that's interesting, when is the last time, if they're an employee, when is the last time that I checked in what's available, or as an employer, what are we doing to ensure that our team, because the benefits you've so beautifully explained is well worth seeing this through, particularly with the increase of stresses. Like, we normally have, as you know, stress during the day, but with what's going on around the world has just taken it to an extreme. So very important. What is the best way, if someone is listening or watching this interview, how best should they connect with you, Kathryn?
Well, they could connect with me on LinkedIn, would be the first thing. So welcome anyone doing that. So that's Kathryn Dixon. Secondly, they could email me at kathryn.dixon, so KATHRYN.DIXON @ioof.com.au, or
Terrific.
phone 1800 325 171, and that'll get to me as well.
Fantastic. And so, Adam, I know that we spoke, or you spoke a lot of the things today. In finishing, if there were one thing that you could repeat in a sentence or a couple of sentences as we finish off the show, just as a reminder and kind of like you got to do this, what would that one thing be, Kathryn? To summarize.
Look, I think it's that historically we've probably looked at employee wellbeing programs as being run on the smell of an oily rag in a lot of cases, and it's been a case of looking for discounts for things that may be short-term discounts. I think where we've now moved to is a recognition that stress in modern life and society is there, that financial stress is a huge component of mental stress, and we're seeing that in terms of the declines in that, and that is affecting productivity in businesses. So financial wellbeing programs is being built into the broader wellbeing program. We can actually see results and benefits that are great for both the employer and the employee. So as you said in that intro, a win-win, that's what I enjoy working for. And I think this is what this program is.
Yeah, and we can certainly sense that through what you've shared today too. So thank you for the
Great.
work you do, and I know it's certainly going to impact a lot of workplaces moving forward. So thanks once again for sharing your insights on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Bye.
You've been listening to Business Women Australia podcast. Want to become part of a dynamic collective of women who are passionate about business success and personal growth? Go to businesswomenaustralia.com.au/membership to apply. That's businesswomenaustralia.com.au/membership.